I want to thank everybody for joining us today for our second Dynamo script share. Just to tell you a little bit more information about the AIA Columbus and technology in the architectural practice. Mission statement for AIA Columbus is AIA is a visionary membership organization providing advocacy, leadership, and resources to architects in order to design a better world. We do have some knowledge communities to share. Thanks. Couldn't get it to share, Josh. I appreciate that. We're kind of stuck there in the middle on a scale of communities there that the AIA Columbus offers. If you're interested in joining any of these, more than happy to have you. Technology and Architectural Practice is also looking for new committee members. If you'd like to members. The objective side, tell you a little bit more about technology and architecture practice. We collaborate with all aspects of the building industry in matters pertaining to technology's influence. We identify opportunities and hurdles that present themselves through buildings process adoption of technology and reinforce the advantages, identify solutions through educating and networking these ideas within the membership, like this script share event right now. We monitor the development of computer technology and its impact on architectural practice and the entire building life cycle, including design, construction, facility management, and retirement or reuse. We communicate regularly with membership on topics regarding technology and practice. And through all the committees of the AIA Columbus, we try to stay engaged if they have a topic that makes sense for our group. We do have some meetings coming up that we do kind of have open right now through 2021. We do understand AIA Columbus is all virtual events. So it would be pretty easy to join in. When we do open back up, we do often involve a happy hour at some of the local bars and distilleries around Columbus. So when that starts again and we're all free to do that, it'd be great to have you join us. So our next event after this is April 8th, will be a committee meeting. So we kind of meet every other month. And our want to also thank our sponsor here, who's Imagine It. They've been sponsoring the TAP committee for a number of years. I mean, at least since 2006, since I've been 2016, not that long, been a member of the organization. So thanks again for sponsoring Imagine It. And to introduce today's presenters, we're going to go kind of in opposite order here. So Eric Blackburn, he is the BIM manager at Berardi Partners. He's been using BIM since 1996, so it goes back a little bit longer than I do for sure. As far as BIM, probably about the same age. Kevin Sullivan, he may be joining us here. He's a little bit out of power, but if not, we've got a few scripts that we can share in his stead. Guy Mazzana of the Director of Technology at Shurkin O'Donovan. He is a structural engineer and comes at it with ways in which I think most of our members here that are attending are architects or working in the architectural practice. So he definitely kind of shows it in a way that is relevant for the work in which we're doing. And then our events here is hosted by Joshua Hostetler. He's the BIM manager at Design Group. He's also the co-chairperson of Technology and Architectural Practice. So I'll let you take it from here, Josh. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicholas. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We are going to start the session again like we did last time with a survey. So if you would take a minute, either on your computer or on your phone, go ahead and go to the website there at the top that you're seeing on the screen and answer the first question. I'd just like to get a little bit of background before we get started. I'm going to put this link in the chat box as well. Just drop that in the chat box as well if you need to access that. All right, uh-oh, looking like we're more no's than yes.
No.
Evening back out a little bit. Nope. It's good, it's exciting. We got more people. Okay, we're going to do another question. We may need to revise this a little bit, but if you attended the first event, I saw there were some yeses on there. Have you used Dynamo since then? And I asked that because in our survey for the first session, not many people had used Dynamo. So if you have not attended the first session, just answer it. Are you currently using Dynamo? Okay, great. And then lastly, last question before we get started is why are you attending today? Just like to get a good feel of why you are all interested in this session. Well, last time we asked, how are you currently wanting to use Dynamo for your office, or how is your office currently using? But today I'd like to know, why are you attending? Time-saving tips in Revit, yes. Improve Dynamo Python skills, see what Dynamo ideas are out there. Trying to utilize Dynamo for our firm to learn more. Love it. These are all great answers. In practice versus in theory, that's a really good one. Wanting to get started in Dynamo, sharing some automated tips. These are all fantastic. Give it just a couple more seconds, see if anything else comes in. Okay, great. Thank you all for your responses. So just to kind of cover, since a lot of you seem to be new and did not attend our first session, we decided to start holding this script share because everybody on this call that is about to talk and kind of present Dynamo are all people who we've kind of taught ourselves and we've kind of just learned along the way. And I had this idea of wanting to do something like this because there were so many times that I sat in a Dynamo class and I was super lost because they always show this super, complicated script with some really cool idea in theory, like somebody mentioned, of what it does, and then they show the finished result. Or they may zoom into a small piece of code or part of the script and say, yeah, this is what this does, this is how you get there. And it seems really awesome, but I was, from start to finish, I just couldn't figure it out. So I eventually sat in on a class, an AU, gosh, maybe 2 years ago now, time's flying by, about somebody who kind of presented a topic of, what can you do with Dynamo in less than 10 nodes or 15 nodes? I can't remember the exact number. And I was really intrigued by that, by saying, okay, well, what are some practical uses for Dynamo? How can we use it? And how can we utilize Dynamo using, a small number of nodes or something that's not complicated? And how can we, kind of the average person or the average Joe, figure out some really interesting time-saving things that we can do in Dynamo? So I started exploring that, came up with some things through the TAP committee, met some guys that are also very interested in that. So we came up with our first session. And the idea behind this session is to one, share what we're doing in Dynamo, because we're all kind of, beginners or novice users, maybe some a little more advanced or intermediate, but just trying to figure out what we're doing, across the different disciplines in our industry. So we came up with the first session, and in the first session, these are the scripts that we covered. Just wanted to give some background. So we shared a couple scripts on how to center kind of the room intersection or that room reference point, center that within the room, so then that you could do your tag all and your tags would drop in the center of that room. We talked about how to color by warnings, so how we can visualize in a 3D model, actually go to a 3D view and tell it to highlight warnings and color them so you can see them visually where your warnings are happening. Talks about ways that we can get the door numbers to match our room numbers. I know there's a lot of ways out there right now with third-party programs to do that, but I shared a script that's very easy to use. I think it had less than 10 nodes itself, maybe, that at the press of a button, you can make your door numbers match your room numbers. We talked about how to change all of your phasing for your model geometry. So if you wanted to grab all of your model geometry and change it to existing, you could do that. Talked about how to duplicate sheets. So how to take an actual sheet with the views on that sheet and completely duplicate it, which is very cool to see. Kevin did that one. Change all of the notes to uppercase. So this is more than just, I've seen a lot of scripts out there that will change any view that's on a sheet in your project browser to uppercase, but this was actually changing all of the notes in all of your views to uppercase, which was nice. And then Guy talked a lot about the fire rated penetrations and how you can mark if there was a fire rated wall and if there was a penetration going through that wall, and it would highlight that, which is really awesome to see. So I wanted to share that part of the script share that we want to do is we want to share scripts that are useful to everybody, but we want everyone to have access to that. So by attending these sessions, you will receive all of these scripts that we share, and we're hopeful that you will all want to start sharing some of the ways that you're using Dynamo. So the last session and this session, we're going to kind of share what we're doing, but we'd like to, in future sessions, invite all of you to bring some scripts along and share what you're doing, because we'd love to see that. It's really great to see what everybody's doing. So I will provide this when I send out the information after this session, but I do have a GitHub page that will have all of the scripts from last session as well as this session. So by attending this session today, you will get access to all of the last session scripts and this session scripts, as well as on the AIA Columbus YouTube channel. We did record that, and we are recording this session, so you can go to this and you can watch the last session. So if you did miss it, check it out. Some really great scripts shared. We talk a little bit more about what Dynamo is, how it's used. I know some of you had mentioned that you're not using Dynamo, so this would be a good place to go start. Inside this session as well, we talked a lot about how to get started. Towards the end, we were getting some questions on some good resources to start. So we did share how you can kind of get started in Dynamo, things that you can look at and things like that. So that is going to be some of the things you're going to get by attending the session today. So I will send out an email either tomorrow or early next week that will have all the information that you need. So we are excited to jump back in to round 2. And we will get started here. So we're going to share a couple scripts. One of our presenters, like Nicholas mentioned, had a power outage and they will not be attending us today. So we will have a few less scripts to share than we wanted to, but hopefully there'll still be some good conversations. So I'm going to start us off. I'm going to share 2 scripts. One of them is something that I just recently did, I think even a week and a half ago. So this is very new. So hopefully it runs smooth for you all. And then I'm going to show kind of another script that I feel is maybe a script that a lot of people, when they first jump into Dynamo, try and do. So I just kind of wanted to walk through a script like that. Well, for this first Dynamo script I'd like to share, I guess before I get started, please feel free to utilize the chat box. We'll try and answer as many questions as we get. Feel free, if I'm in the middle of my script and you have a question, please stop me and ask. But utilize that chat box there and we'll get going. But for this first script that I want to share, we had an issue come up where a project team, let me make sure I pull this up so I don't misspeak, but the project team had incorrectly called out the frame depth for some of their doors in the wall types that they were using. So on site, when they were trying to put all this together, they realized very quickly that the frames that they had and they called out weren't actually the right size. So they had to get pretty creative with how they were going to kind of fix that. So the team came back to me and asked if there was any way that we could use Dynamo as a double check when reviewing door submittals to make sure that they have the correct frame depth. So I put a little script together to walk through what that does. So essentially what they needed was they needed each of the doors to be able to pull the information from the wall. So that's kind of what we're going to do for this first script. So before we jump into Dynamo, the first thing I needed to do here in this door and frame schedule was I needed to create 2 project parameters that I could push data from the wall into. So the first 2 parameters that I created were wall type and wall host width. So these were just project parameters. So under the fields here, I just went ahead and at the bottom, I just created brand new parameters, project parameters, and just called them whatever I wanted them to be, because essentially we're just going to push information to those. So I made a wall type and a wall host width because this project team specifically wanted to know the wall type that the door was in, so our nomenclature for what the type of that wall is, and then the overall width of that wall so they could use as a quick back check. So in order for a script like this to work, when you get the script in the script share, you're just going to have to make sure that you're creating 2 project parameters, and I'll show you in the Dynamo script where that's at. So that's all I did there to get us started. So if I come over to Dynamo, this is the script. As you can see, it's not super long. It's going to be pretty easy to read and go through. But essentially, the way I like to work in Dynamo is I like to think about how I'm going to go through that task in Revit. So I'm going to think about what I would do in Revit and then just try and replicate that through Dynamo. So if I was to try and find information that I'm looking for in this specific case in Revit, I would grab the door, I would find the host or the wall, select that wall, and then read that information. So that's essentially all I'm doing here. So to get us started, the first thing I need to do is select all of my doors. So there's a wide variety of ways you can select things inside of Dynamo, but I like to do when trying to select something out of Revit is to just pull the category. I find that to be the easiest way to pull information from Dynamo. So all I'm doing here is I just dropped a category node. So again, we had some questions earlier on in our first session about how to place something. So in Dynamo, you can search for things up here, or you can search through all of these different packages or all this Revit content and go through and find different ways to select things. Or what I like to do is just right click on the canvas and then just search. So if I know I'm looking for categories, I can just search for categories and see what options I have here, find what I'm looking for. If you hover over it, it will give you a little description. I can click to place categories, and there we go. I can begin building my script that way. So again, I just drop down my categories node. I'm just going to then, I can see that I have all my categories to choose from, and then I'm just going to choose my door categories because that's what I want to select. And then that just selects the category. So now I have to tell Dynamo I actually need to select all the doors in my project. So to do that, there's a node called all elements of category. So all it is doing is grabbing every element in the Revit project of this category. So all we're doing here is selecting all of our doors, drop the category, now we've grabbed all of them. And I can do that if I drop a watch node here and I plug this node into a watch node. All a watch node does is just showing you what information you have. So what I'm going to do here is just freeze these real quick so we don't actually run the script. And then if I run that, you'll see it kicks out all my information. Give it a second to run. And you can see here it's selected 621 doors, and it'll actually kick out the size or the type of that door as well, which is nice. So I grabbed all of my doors in this project, and now we have to tell Dynamo what to do with it. So one of the nice things I like about Dynamo is that it's open source. So a lot of the hard work has actually been done for us already. And you'll hear us talk a lot about packages and custom nodes. So with Dynamo being open source, there's a lot of people that will go through, create their own custom code writing and all that stuff and package it into their own specific nodes and then release that as a package. You can see my add-ons here. I have all these different packages. These are going to be a bunch of people who've created a bunch of nodes out there already that do a list of commands. And you can just simply, again, the best way to find them is to right-click and search for stuff. So when thinking through the script, what I was thinking about was, okay, well, how do I grab the wall that the door is a part of? So I start thinking in Revit specifically, okay, well, a door is wall hosted. So could I just have Dynamo pull the host? So I started looking at what nodes were available around hosting. So I found this node here called get host element, which is awesome because if I drop another watch node and I plug this in, what it will do is take all of the doors and then spit out the host of each one of those doors, which is perfect because now you can see I have 621 walls. And that's perfect because I now have all of the walls that are hosts for my doors. So then I'm just going to continue going down. So now if I drop another watch node here, what I wanted to do is grab the name of those doors because essentially I'm eventually going to try and pull the name of the door so that I can pull the type mark and all that stuff. So if I pull this element.name, which is just how to pull the name of the element into there, it'll spit out the actual name of each one of those walls. And as you can see here, why I'm leaving these watch nodes up is I wanted you to see here that Dynamo starts at 0 and then starts counting up. So, door 0 is this a 3 foot by 7 foot, which gives me the wall host, which is 0, which that wall 0 is a generic 5-inch 2-hour wall. So it just kind of all is working together. Now this next step took me a little while to figure out, probably a little more complex, but this just gave me the name, but I actually had to get the wall type by the name. So this is kind of a redundant thing here, but you'll notice here that this just gives me the wall name itself. But then if I drop another watch node and plug that wall type by name, it will actually turn this into geometry. These green numbers you're seeing here are the element ID numbers that you can click on, and it will highlight that specific piece in Revit rather than Dynamo. So I had to be able to pull the name so that I could then eventually grab the wall type itself, because that would be the only way then I could then start pulling some of that information. So I'm going to delete some of these, clean up our canvas a little bit. So again, all we've done so far is we grabbed all of our doors. We've then grabbed the host of each of those doors, and then we've pulled the name. So then from there, I start thinking in Revit, okay, well, if I want to look at some information about a wall, what do I do? Well, once I have the wall selected, I just go to my properties and I look at that information. I can look at the width, I can look at the type mark, so on and so forth. So what I had to tell Dynamo to do from here is just pull some parameters. Well, in Dynamo, there is a node called element get parameter value by name. And all that is essentially doing is saying, plug in the element you want me to read, which would be our walls, and then tell me the parameter you want to read. Okay? So if I drop another watch node, plug a watch node in here. So here I'm saying, okay, well, if I go back and look at Revit specifically, let me just pull this up real quick. If I just go to any plan really, and I grab a wall, well, I know that if I look in here, and I hit edit type, well, I know I have a width parameter that's going to tell me my width, and then my type mark is going to tell me the type of wall that it is. Okay, so if I go back into Dynamo, and I say, okay, well, from my wall, so I just have my wall types plugged into my element, I want to know the width. So if I do that and hit run, it's now going to pull me, now this is decimals, which when we kick it back into Revit, it'll understand that. That's just how Dynamo is working. But it will pull the actual width of every single one of these wall types, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Then if I place another watch node up here so you can see, I also want to pull the type mark and run that. So some of these you're seeing verify, it just has to verify back into Revit, so it's not going to show them here, but it'll kick out find in the schedule. But you can see here I have some P9As. This is our nomenclature for walls. Some of these are just generic walls because maybe they were existing or something like that, or just going to have that wall type in there. But essentially what I've been able to do now is select my doors, select the host of each of those doors, and then pull whatever parameter value that I want to see from those walls. So here I have my type marks. Here I have my wall widths. But our last step is to get that legible in a schedule, and more specifically a door schedule. So unfortunately, in the out-of-the-box tools in Revit, I'm not able to look at wall information
in a door schedule. So what I had to do was create those two project parameters, so my wall type and my wall host width, and I essentially just have to now tell Dynamo, well, take the information you extracted for me and push them to my new parameters that I can make schedulable inside of Revit. So there is a node here called element set parameter by name. So again, all I'm doing is plugging in my elements. Now remember, this is our door element, so I have to go back and grab all of my doors. So I'm plugging this elements in rather than before we were using the walls. So I'm going to plug my door elements into my element node here. I'm going to tell the parameter name that I want it to fill in. So these are my project parameters. You can see I noted them there for you. So if you wanted to call them something different, this is just a string node, so you can just type in here. This is just text. So if you wanted to call yours something else, you could just change that there. But these are our two project parameters, and then my values. And my values are coming out of these nodes here. So for my wall type parameter, I'm just plugging in my type mark from the wall, so that's going to go in here. And then for my wall host width parameter, I'm just using the actual wall width and plugging that in to there. So I shrink this down so we can take a look here. I scroll over. And when I'm all said and done, I run this. You'll see all it's going to do is grab that information that we have extracted from the walls and fill them into these parameters. So now in this door schedule, I have a super quick check to say, okay, I know this door is in a P9A wall that's 4 7/8 inch thick or 5 inches thick or so on and so forth. And that's worked for, looks like, all but one of these. So this wall just may not have a type mark in it. So we found this is a really quick, easy way to check, to simply add information to a schedule that the team members could verify when they were looking at the door submittals. I do believe they took this even a step further and they applied this to the windows as well. So they could do the same thing for their window frames. I'd have to confirm that they did that, but last time I was in the model, it looked like they did. But all they had to do here was same thing, just change the category to windows, come up with two new parameters that you applied to windows, and this would be exactly the same. You call all your windows, look at your window host, which would be the wall, and then you're pulling that information from the wall. So there's a quick, easy way in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13 nodes. You have some pretty powerful information that you can attach all of your host data to your doors themselves.
Okay, I'll start with one, and then we'll see where you're at, and then I'll fill in with a couple of others I had afterwards. But let me go ahead and share my screen. So like Nicholas mentioned, I am a structural engineer, but the scripts I'm sharing, I think, can apply to a few architectural or just construction projects in general. So today, the ones I'm going to share, I hope you can see the kind of merit, whatever discipline you might be coming from. I think we're mostly architects here, though. Can you all see my screen? You see the little sample Revit building that comes out of the box Revit. Does everybody see that okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So today, the script I want to share is, I'll try to share a couple. These are recent ones that I've made. I've seen it at a couple of different places before. But one of the things we often have to do in Revit, and I'll start here in Revit, is if we have to issue a bunch of different packages of drawings or sheets of drawings, if we want to include them as part of an issuance, it can get a little tedious. So Dynamo can really help us speed up the way in which we fill out our title blocks, the way that we manipulate some of those parameters that are part of that. So I was going to show you today how we use that to speed up our process. So let's say, for example, we have these, I don't know, these 6 revisions that are part of this project. Obviously, we wouldn't have them all at once, but for today's example, I'll just show it as if we're starting with all of these and filling in the title block. So the way we do it in Revit out of the box, as I'm sure we're all aware, is we we can change how the revisions show up on the title block by just selecting in the view and then checking the box to say, hey, this revision shows up on this sheet. So we can check the number of revisions that show up on the sheet. So let's say the sheet went out with all of these different revisions. I would check all those boxes, and then it would be in my title block. The issue comes up whenever we have some 40-some sheets. We'd have to go through and click on each of these sheets, or however many sheets we have, click on each of these sheets, and then have to do that same process again and again. It doesn't end up happening. You know, we can't select multiple sheets and do that process. It's not something that we have available to us as a parameter. So what Dynamo can let us do is it allows us to kind of tap into that portion of Revit to be able to input all the different revisions all at once. So right before you're about to issue, you could run this script here, and I'll show you how it works in a minute after I describe it, but we could run this script here, and then we can populate all those different revisions. Now, I know this looks like a lot of nodes, but I'll hopefully break it down a little bit more. I use a similar color coding system to Joshua, but slightly different. But I like to organize in a way that kind of groups them. So they may look like there's a lot going on here, but really it can be boiled down to just these 4 different kind of functions happening. I have a few packages that are loaded in Dynamo, and you know, I list those in the beginning here to show you which ones I'm using. And the biggest one is data shapes, and I'm sure a lot of us have come across that because it's such a valuable tool, as you'll see here in a minute. So normally I have a little bit of authorship stuff at the top. If I need any special parameters, like Joshua was showing us with those project parameters he needed for his wall calcs, for his wall checks, I also have kind of an input part of that on scripts that we roll out more formally. So what I'm doing is I use blue for inputs, is I am prompting the user for the sheets requiring revisions. So data shapes allows us to populate a dialog box in Revit. So when we run something with this data shapes add-in, you know, data shapes is kind of a package that gets added on top of Dynamo, and your library has these listed in kind of the lower left here. So there's a number of them. I think data shapes is really a good one, along with Archilabs and a few others that you'll notice as we talk today. But data shapes allows us to kind of put a user interface into Revit whenever we run this graph. So it allows us to prompt somebody without having them to go in, without the need for them to go into Dynamo and run a graph themselves. So this first blue box here is really just taking the sheet number, you know, kind of merging that with the sheet name, and then putting that in kind of a list dialog. So I want to get the sheet number and the sheet name, and then I want to prompt the user to select the sheet that they need. And then I also want to get a list of revisions that are part of the project. So I want to grab all those 6 revisions I showed, and I want to put those into another list as well. So that's what's happening here in this second blue box. So I merged those 2 things together, the sheet number name and the revisions, and I put that into another component of data shapes. And they have a great website too that I won't bore you with the details here, but they have a great website to show you how all these different nodes work and how you feed into them. So I take the sheets and I take the revisions, and then I put them into this master input form, this multiple input form. And what happens is it'll prompt the person in Revit, okay, select the sheets and select the revisions, and then it'll send that to an input node. And then once I have the sheets and the revisions, then I can go in and I can extract, you know, item at index 1 is the sheet, or index 0 is the sheet name. So I'll have a list of sheets that I want and a list of revisions that I want on those sheets. I can run that, and then I can extract, okay, given a sheet name and a revision, I can start to populate that dialog box I showed you for those couple, I can populate that kind of checkbox across multiple sheets. So rather than me describing it, let me run it, and then we'll pop this open. So I'm just going to move this to the other sheet, but all I'm going to do, or other screen that I have, all I'm going to do is hit run here, and then it will show you kind of a dialog box of how this works. So just move this out of the way so we can see what it looks like in Revit. So I hit run off the screen here, and if everything goes according to plan, I get an input, and it says, okay, now I want to add revisions to multiple sheets. Well, which ones do I want to add to? So let's say, you know, I got these 3 sheets here that were part of DD, they were part of the SD, and they were part of the, you know, a permit set. I can now check the sheets that I want. I can check the revisions that I want. I hit add revisions. And now I look at those sheets and I see that they were populated with this information. The next thing I can do is I can run that again if later on down the course of the project after those sheets have gone out. I hit run and then it prompts me again and it says, okay, well now I got, you know, these couple other sheets, maybe they appeared as part of Rev 1 and Rev 2. So now I can add revisions to those 3 sheets and I go to those and you can see they're populated with Rev 1 and Rev 2. So the time savings with using that on a project that's, you know, got dozens of sheets is pretty big. And I think one of the really nice benefits of Dynamo, just taking those really tedious tasks and automating how that works. So I'm real happy to share that with all of you. And then after you've run Dynamo, you'll get these, you'll get some, you know, it'll populate with the information that was input from the user. Here's the 3 sheets I selected. Here's the 2 revisions I wanted to put on it. So as you play around with this and run this, you should be able to see how that all works. So we'll also include the packages that are part of these scripts. So you'll have to download a few packages with this to be able to make this run. But we'll help you get going on that. But just as a refresher for those that don't know, you would go under packages, manage packages. Actually, I take that back. You would go under packages, search for a package, and you'll search for the ones that we're sharing today in this kind of server here, and then you can download the ones. But those will be included with what we share so that you know how that works. And those packages are really just how people across the world make and share things to speed up the process. It just embeds a little bit of Python. It embeds a few different nodes together just to clean up the way things look. So those could be really handy. And maybe, you know, one other thing I'll show here on this revisions is a revision log. And this is something that's been on my list for a really long time and recently made. But oftentimes when we issue drawings in the field, the first thing we want to be checking is, you know, do the people in the field have the latest and greatest set of drawings? Or maybe we even include that on a sheet in the cover of ours. Our documents that shows, okay, here's the sheet, and then here's the date that it was issued, or here's what package it was issued. Now this one is a little bit of a work in progress, but I think, you know, the bones are here for you to be able to kind of use it to keep track of when things were issued and as part of what issuance or what rev, and then you can have kind of a table of sheet name and then when it was issued. So I find that to be pretty handy. So let me describe the Dynamo again, and then I'll run it real quick so you can see what I mean. So here, again, we're prompting the user for a spreadsheet. So I store this data in a spreadsheet so you can see the name of the sheet and then the issuance. And then I can, so I prompt the user for a spreadsheet to write to so that we can write this information to that table. And then in these other categories, we read the sheet names, we extract the sheet name and the revisions on each sheet. So what this is doing is similar to what Joshua was showing earlier with, you know, you can search by categories. You can say, give me all the categories that are in this given Revit model, and you can use it. You could say, I want to grab all the sheets, and then I want to select all elements of category. So this is going to say, take that category, and I want you to select all sheets. So right now, these 2 nodes select all the sheets in the project. I was writing this in a couple different versions of Dynamo. So I use this as more of a fail-safe instead of those 2 nodes, because I can type in some text here, I just said, okay, I want to grab my category called sheets, and then I want to select everything. So don't get confused by any of that. It's just my way of making this work across a couple different versions of Dynamo. Because what I was noticing as a quick aside here was that if I grab this categories drop-down box in Dynamo version 1 point something, and then I upgraded to version 2.0, then I ended up with an issue with this thing's creeping on me and not working between different versions. So this would, like, when I'd open it in a newer version, it wouldn't be on sheets anymore. It would be like a couple categories down for whatever reason. So it must be the sorting mechanism of this dialog and the two different versions of Dynamo. I'm getting us in the weeds here, but anyway, all that to say, this should hopefully work for you across a couple different versions. So I prompted for a spreadsheet, and then I'm just in these green boxes working in Revit. I'm saying, okay, give me all the sheets, and then list for me all the sheet names and numbers. Again, give me the revision information for those sheets. And then once I have the sheet name and the revisions associated with those sheets, let's write that information to Excel so that we can have kind of a memorialization of that information. So I'm going to move this off screen, run it again. Hopefully it works. I don't have any hiccups, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here you can see it pops up with that dialog. I've inserted a logo. You can insert a logo with data shapes. So it prompts me for a file path. So I click on the file path and I say, okay, I want to do a revision log here. I click on revision log, and then I hit run. And then what happens off to the side here that popped up on my other dialog is it gives me the sheet name here on the left. It gives me the sheet, the issuances. So I know A102. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit of a work in progress, but you could use some of the built-in Excel features to sort this how you'd like. But you can see here, it gives you the sheet name and then when it was issued and what part of that. So I think that can be really handy. And you can use that to probably populate a sheet schedule if you want to put that on the front of documents or issue that as part of every revision. But that can save, I think, quite a bit of time. And hopefully something you could find to be useful. So I think that's about all I wanted to share on these revision ones. Joshua, I don't know if you want to take over, or I can hop into some more structural specific ones that I think also have applications for a couple areas, interdisciplinary. But I want to save time for.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So in your revision script there that added the revision date and items to the sheet revision index there, that's operating without the benefit of using revision cloud, which would automatically add something to there. That doesn't affect any of that. If you do place clouds, it will give you the option of which revision it's a part of, and then add it to the schedule accordingly. Yeah,
if I added a cloud here, I mean, you may need to be careful when you run that across the board, but yeah, let's say I added sorry, this little dialog here is giving me a little trouble. Let me try to minimize this little box at the top for Zoom, but let me just add a cloud. It does not affect that. I was going to add a cloud and show you, but if I annotate here and I put in a revision cloud and these windmills or something, or part of permit set, I can add that information here and tag it. I guess I don't have a revision cloud in this example model, but I add that, and then it should show up in your title block just fine. So you can do that and it still works as more conventionally how we would like. But I think the real benefit of it is realized whenever you're issuing those first sheets of your drawing set.
Okay,
I think
cool.
That's
Thank you.
Really save time. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so Joshua, I don't know if you want me to keep going or if you want to, you guys share and then I can come back as time permits, or I'm happy to do anything you'd you'd like me to do here?
I think Josh is still having technical difficulties, unfortunately.
Okay.
So we may.
All right.
If you
Well,
want to
let
go,
me.
or if we could have Eric, if he's ready, you could go next and see
Yeah,
where
I'm ready.
Josh is at.
Okay. Yeah. Let's let Eric go, and then I will come back if we still have some technical difficulties.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? I've got a YouTube channel showing.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so my two scripts essentially are coming from a site that I follow. So Jeff Pinero is known as the Revit Kid, and since the COVID pandemic, he's been doing basically a weekly live YouTube channel that has sometimes very famous guests in the architectural world and Revit and Dynamo, but calculating occupancy in Revit. And I've provided a link in the Word document that will be part of the files that are shared. But for now, I'm just going to cancel that. But he has videos going back probably as many as 7 years. So lots of information to choose from there. So I'm going to close out of that. What I've done is opened up the advanced architectural sample file. The only thing I've done to that is change the units to imperial. The script that I'm going to go through is calculating occupancy automatically. And the three packages that you need to install are archilab.net, Bumblebee, and Clockwork for Dynamo 2.0. So as you can see, this is my installed package manager. It's already in there. If you needed them, you would go to packages, search, and type it in, and then you can add it. So I've already got those in there. These actually use Dynamo Player, so there's no real editing of the script at all. So I'm going to close the Dynamo Player and come back to Revit here. So if you look at the annotation, let's see, I'm sorry, architecture, room, and area, there are area and volume calculations out of the box. There are the gross building and rentable area schemes, and those are the out of the box ones. So what Dana D. Philippi with Smith Group out of Washington, D.C. area has done is kind of developed a workflow. She presented it at Autodesk University in 2017. Let me switch over to that and start at the beginning here. So automating occupancy a smarter way, going through, those are the three scripts that are, three packages that are necessary. But she's also shared, let's see, these things. So I've added a Word file that has the links to that. There's an occupancy load annotation tag. There's two Dynamo Player scripts. There's an Excel spreadsheet and a sample file that basically has already been set up with her life safety schedule and occupancy. So going back to my Revit file here, I'm going to go insert and then insert from file and point to the sample file here, occupancy schedules. I'll open that. And what I'll be presented with is a list of files that I can import. There's only two things that I need to bring in. And they both have to do with life safety. So we'll have a LS prefix. And I don't have Revit 2020, so I have to upgrade when I do that to 2021. Okay, so there are two schedules, LS area schedule and LS function of space key. So I just check those two and click OK. And that's created. Now I have a LS area schedule and an LS function of space keys schedule, which is a key schedule. And right now it is not populated, and neither is the area schedule of that. So the next step is I go to I go to view, and the Zoom panel is in the way. got to come up with something better. So I go to View, Plan Views, and Area Plan. And now I have the option of life safety as the type on there. And I want to create one for the entry level. I could do second and third floor, but I'm just going to demonstrate this in a quick manner. So I'm just going to select the entry level and hit OK. And this is the one you typically do not want to do. So you just check no on that. And now it's created an entry level. If I look at my properties, that's a life safety area plan on that. So now I can go in and start to place area boundaries. And the advantage of area boundaries is, depending on the code that you're using, you may need to go to the outside face of the wall, or the inside face of the exterior wall, or the center line of a demising wall. You have some flexibility. For the purpose of this, I'm not going to be too particular in how I pick those items. I'm just using the pick lines tool and rapidly picking some boundaries. So picking these walls to create separate areas. You could manually sketch it and be very precise in how you want to define the area boundaries, but for this demonstration, I'm just going quickly, and I'm just picking basically this wing area. So I've got some areas, boundaries placed. Now I can go to architecture and place areas, and I should be able to specify the tag. Let's see, properties. Yeah, so I have my occupant load and name in there, and I can place those, and it starts to show the area of that space. And I'll just do a few more here, and those are all the ones that I have. Okay, so if I go back to this area schedule, it started to populate. I haven't assigned anything from the key schedule yet because it hasn't populated the key schedule. So the items in yellow here are user entry. So I would be entering in that information. The items in gray are generated from the key schedule. The items in this light blue color are generated from the Dynamo player script. And the item in dark blue is basically a formula that does the calculations on everything. So now that I have some areas placed, the next step is to go to my populate my key schedule so that I can assign the use group for that. And so I'm going to go to my Manage tab, and of course it's hidden from me, and go to Dynamo Player. And what that does are those two scripts, copy occupant load factors or setup function of space key. The only one that I need to edit is this setup function of the space key, so the key schedule. And I would click on the pencil there, and it's going to pop up a dialog box that gives me a few choices. As soon as that pops up, oops, I did not want to edit that. I wanted to do the dialog box, edit the input. My apologies. Okay, so what it's done is it's saying what code do you want to use, what year do you want to use, and specifying the Excel file with the area function. So I've navigated to this Excel spreadsheet and hit open. And I'll open this up quickly just to show you what that looks like. Essentially, it is the International Building Code in 2012, 15, 18 versions, and the Life Safety NFPA 101 and 12, 15, and 18 versions. So I'm going to select NFPA 101, and I want the year 2018. So in Dynamo Player, I can select 2018, and making sure that I have the function of space key. So that's the key schedule that I want to populate. So I have selected that, I hit run. and it should just take a second. And it's completed. So if I go back to Revit here and look at my space key schedule, it's pulled that information from the from the Excel spreadsheet for the code and year. It lists what it's from and the version. It's given us the use. It's given us the occupant factor, and whether it's gross square foot or net square foot. And the only exception to this one is fixed seating, which is basically done by fixed seat. So that's a specific calculation there. So now that I have my key schedule populated, I can come into here. If I tab select and get the area, and then I can assign a, first of all, I can change it to, say, cafeteria. The function space key, I can say this is assembly. It looks like unconcentrated because of kind of loose tables and chairs. And now if I look at my area schedule, it's assigned a name, it's assigned the use group, and the occupant, so the key schedule has populated those items in gray. Okay. So going back to Revit again. Oops. And then my life safety plan, I'm going to pull this out of the way. I can change some of these other ones. So this one is office. And we'll change that to business general. I'm not going to rename all these, but I'll assign them as categories to speed it up a little bit. This is, we'll say, business collaboration space. It's greater than 450 square feet, looking at the area tag. This one is an electrical room, so we'll assign that to unoccupied. The stairs we can assign to unoccupied. So it is starting to go through and assign these categories. So my schedule starts to populate, my areas are adding up. So we could go through and do a lot more of these, but I have enough to demonstrate the next step. So if I go back to my Revit player or Dynamo player and run the next script, I can just run this one. I don't need to edit anything. And what it's going to do is copy the numbers in the key schedule, which are in units that can't necessarily be scheduled and added to a tag. But then it can do the calculations of dividing the area per occupant by the square footage available. So it starts to give you the occupant loads and adjust those and total those. So if I go back to the entry level now, I can see that my cafeteria has an occupant load of 106 and just under 1,600 square feet. So if I were to take this boundary and move it, it's not letting me shift it. If I delete this boundary and go back and sketch a wider area. Oops. Now my area has increased, my occupancy has increased. I didn't need to do anything, so that kind of automates it there. There's a couple of gotchas. If I assign one of these to be a fixed number, seating, and then go back to my area schedule. Basically, and let's see, I need to run the script again. And when you update it, it's supposed to do conditional formatting, but there's a fixed occupant load, and the occupant load is set to 0. So I should be able to come in here and type in the exact number of occupants. So let's say it was 15 fixed seats. It should update the occupant load accordingly. The conditional formatting is supposed to turn that red because your occupant load is 0, but that particular part of the script didn't work in this instance. But the fixed one is its own kind of condition. Okay, so in going back to the Autodesk University handout that she had delivered, she had gone through a way with some scripting here, and it's really too small to zoom in on, but she was able to basically select the rooms that had already been placed and use those to create room boundaries and room names. So use the rooms that are in there to create areas and area names to match those rooms. Didn't have time to kind of recreate that and share that, but there's directions she goes through it in more detail in her Autodesk University presentation, the video that you watch, not so much in the handouts. So anyway, there's also some gotchas that she goes through and explains, having to reload something if you were to go into the Excel spreadsheet, and let's say there was a new version in 2021, you would just duplicate it, add the information. You'd have to rerun it to re-import that new data, or if a municipality updated, if you do the same types of projects over and over and over again, and there's very little likelihood that you need to change these, you could just bring in one version into your project templates or your company templates and not need to go through this step. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. But once it's created, the areas are dynamic. They do update with the occupancy. She's been working on another one for plumbing calculations. So if that ever comes out, we'll be happy to share that as well. So that was the first one. Close out of this. The second one is in 2019, and I opened up the basically the home version. I've got a site, and this one has to do with a new package that's been out for a little while called DynaMaps. And the whole intent is to use OpenStreetSource or OpenStreetMaps and build in an easier way to generate some site context. I've been experiencing a lot of flakiness with it a little bit lately. I couldn't even get it to run in 2021. But again, the only thing I've done here is I've assigned a location to be Columbus, Ohio. So basically I picked a dream site for our dream home here, and then changed the units to be architectural imperial feet and inches, and then rotated it essentially on site. So this one uses a package in Dynamo called Dynamo Maps or DynaMaps. You can download it by searching for it, but once it's installed, bring it over here. You can, so under Manage, I've got DynaMaps installed, and essentially to launch it, you're going to hit DynaMaps. That does is bring a map on it. I can hit just take me to the site coordinates, and if I change it to satellite view, it's this little strip of ground, green space, kind of Moody Nolan's office is over here. We've got Huntington Park. We've got the Crew Stadium. Got Nationwide Arena. So it's kind of looking towards the downtown area. But I basically pick the area that I want to, and then you have the option to change the density of the map. So right now it's set to 10 by 10. So it would take this square that's presented and divide it by 10 in each direction. So you'd have 100 dots. I can go as high as 40 by 40, so that'd be 16 times. But for this, I'm going to make it as simple as possible. And then all you do is hit push to Dynamo. Okay. And then I'm going to run a new Dynamo session, essentially. And I've pushed it to Dynamo. So now I can go into Dynamo DynaMaps, and under the live button, I can say, okay, I want to see the buildings. So I basically want to also change from automatic to manual, otherwise it will run and get you into trouble. So change it from auto to manual. And then under settings, I've run into issues where the geometry scaling is set a little bit low for big areas. So I normally would change it to large. You may need to change it to extra large. So change it there, hit apply changes. And it's already run because it was on automatic. So if I zoom out, now it has placed footprint. This is Huntington Stadium. I think that's part of Nationwide Arena and some other buildings adjacent. I think Moody Nolan's office there and our site of our dream home. So it's already run, so I don't need to run that one again, but I can take now the footprint surfaces, add that, and if I run that one, that will take these polygons and then fill them and create basically a surface from the polygon. So the next step, I can add roads. I can say roads as polycurve, so I add that and hit run. And that will take all the street data that's available from OpenStreetMaps and insert it. I can come in and take the topography as points and hit run, and it will do that 10 by 10 grid of points and place those. And then I can add the poly surface from the points, hit run, and it will connect those points in a poly surface. And there may or may not be trees, but we'll go ahead and run that one too. And I didn't see anything show up, so I haven't a big enough area. Some places have trees, some of them don't. So once you've done kind of the input of the site from this DynaMaps browser, you can close that. You don't need that anymore. The next thing I can start to do is say, okay, I want to get the buildings and project them onto the topo surface. So I add this node to it. And a couple things, none of these had any inputs. It was just from the information that was pushed to it, but they do have outputs. And then this project buildings on topo has inputs. So the first one here says footprint surfaces. So I need to go down to my buildings and footprint services. I take the output from there and connect it to the input of the node. And then the second one says building elevation. So I place that. Those, I can hit run and it will take a minute to process. And if I zoom in on those, you can see that it's moved the buildings, projected them on the topo surfaces, added the elevation from OpenStreetMaps. You don't have a ton of control with that. but it's better. Now, with the roads, I've had more trouble with getting this to work correctly, but your next one, using roads as a surface, it has two inputs that it's asking for. So the road poly curve. So if I select all of these and connect roads poly curves to that input, now it's asking for a road's width. And I just want to input my own custom block of text. So double clicking anywhere gives you that. So I can just say, let's make it 10 feet. And then using that as a input should give me a 10-foot wide offset, essentially total offset. So 5 feet on each line of the polygon or the poly curve. So if I run that, I've been having problems where it crashes. So hopefully this may work for this instance. While that's processing, I'll try and sneak a look over at my Revit file here. It won't let me. And like I said, it crashed. So anyway, like I said, it's been a little bit flaky. So I apologize for that. It would not take me very long to do. If I simplified a little bit and didn't do the roads, there's another one that I'll try and do real quick as soon as it pops back up. But the other thing that I've been experimenting with, and I'm unfortunately frustrated that I can't get anything out of it. This is from InfraWorks, and it has a similar map builder where you're presented with a map view and you can drag a rectangle. And so ideally what I'd like to be able to do is take my site, link in my Revit model, and have all this beautiful site context. So that's kind of what I did, but the problem is I can't get it out of InfraWorks and into Revit in a way that I can use it and keep all of the beautiful terrain, all of the roads with better width than OpenStreetMaps, and the aerial photography. So it's a much bigger site. It's pretty responsive. Obviously the buildings are a little bit stylized, but anyway. So my project new, change it to run manual, settings, geometry, large, apply. Okay, so I shouldn't need this anymore. DynaMaps, live, buildings. I'll do the footprints, run, do the surfaces, run, and then we'll do the topo. Okay, so switching to the model view, I've got that. So go into utilities, buildings, project buildings on topo. So surfaces to surfaces, elevations and poly to poly. I'm not going to crop it. hit run, and that gives it the height. Then I'm not going to worry about roads or trees. So there's another utility under Revit now that I can take the building geometry and click that. So it's asking for footprint surface. So I need to do my building surface here, my elevation there. It's asking for a category. So I need to add a categories node and then select, change it to, let's say site. So I can type in S to move me to that part of the list. It's asking for topo surface and adjust the topo, and that's another Boolean. Yes or no. And we'll say true. And generate the building pad. I'm not going to worry about that. So I hit run and it's completed. Now if I close that and look at my Revit model, it's added some site context to it. They're still seeing the dots and things. So, simplified it a little bit. In the information packet you should be getting for the DynaMaps, there's another list of the BIM After Dark Live YouTube video that shows it, and then the actual DynaMaps page, and then data shapes page. So there's a couple other tutorials to go through. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't know if they've done some updates, so stuff isn't behaving as well as it should. But anyway, thank you for your attention. It's been a pleasure. So thank you. I'll quit sharing. Oops.
Thanks, Eric. I think we have Josh back, but he's only on his phone. So I think we're probably going to postpone the scripts that he's sharing. But we may try to, we'll definitely still be releasing the ones that Guy and Eric discussed here today.
Sorry about that, everybody. I really don't know what happened. Nothing like trying to present with technical difficulties. Yes, thank you for Guy and Eric for taking over. I really appreciate that. I will, the script I started to show, I will record that, and maybe you can see I can work with you and I can try and edit that so I can at least put that script in there. So that way when we post this video, my script will at least be in there. And then I will also, when I send you the scripts that were used today, I will make sure that my recording is also in there as well. And then I'll just wait to share that second script I was going to share for our next session. But I'll definitely make sure to do that. Are there any questions? I know I was only able to sign on right before you started your second script there, Eric. Are there any questions from anybody? I know I unfortunately had to miss Guy's script, but were any questions that come up? I saw some packages being talked about. Did anybody explain what packages are? Just to make sure everybody's clear. Dynamo is open source, so a lot of people will go in there and create their own custom nodes. So when we talk about packages, that is just a group of nodes that someone has already custom made and released for use for free. So you can download those packages. In the folder that I will send you, I will have a screenshot of all the packages that I used. Just out of the box, Revit can be a little limited. There are some things you can do pretty easily with just that, but it will be beneficial to you to download some of those packages. We do have a question. Any tutorial sources you recommend? Good question. Everyone else, feel free to chime in here. I think there really is some good stuff through Dynamo or DynoBIM. I can't remember the exact name of the website. There's Dynamo Primer and DynoBIM. They do have a whole tutorial series on there. Let me see if I can pull it up and send the link in the chat.
Yeah, while he's looking up Autodesk University is basically if you sign up for an Autodesk account, which you should have as a Autodesk user, You can browse all of their courses from past Autodesk universities. You can search for Dynamo, Carl Storms, John Pearson, Marcelo. These are all names that are pretty big developers in terms of that, but also at the same time, they're emphasizing simplicity. So those are really good resource to search through Autodesk University as well. Or if anybody has a Columbus Public Library membership, that includes access to the lynda.com training videos. There are specific courses on that as well. So lots of opportunities. But the main thing is just kind of dive in and kind of learn. It's a very logical system. The way things connect, the way things are asking for. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's not overly difficult. Most of the people have kind of self-taught themselves, but there are pretty good resources. So good luck.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. I did put the other 2 links there in the chat. Specifically that Dynamo BIM, there is some tutorials and things that you can go through there that are some pretty good information there as well. But yeah, lynda.com would be great, and all of the Autodesk University stuff. So that would be a great place to start. Any other questions that we can try and answer with our last few minutes? Again, apologies about the technical difficulties. We will make sure we get you all this information. And I'll make sure I send out some recordings of stuff I was going to go over. But anything else?
I will point out my occupancy one kind of demonstrated the difference between Dynamo itself and Dynamo Player. Dynamo Player is a simplified interface that limits the ability of most users, or ones that you certainly wouldn't want dragging these complicated graphs around. So that is a possibility that you can set things up with very limited need to interface with it, if any at all.
Absolutely, that's a great thing to bring up, and I would like to do future sessions for our Dynamo Scripture specifically about Dynamo Player. And there's another program that I use called Dynamo that allows you to take a script and turn it into an actual Revit button. You can create your own tab inside of Revit, so you create your own company tab, and then you can start to put some of your scripts in there. A lot of the questions that I've gotten when trying to do some of these sessions is, how practical is Dynamo? Because all these things we show you, yeah, they look nice, but can you expect the standard user to be able to jump in and run those scripts? So there are definitely ways that you can yourself learn how to use Dynamo, create those scripts, and then package those and run them in Dynamo Player or through Dyno in your own Revit add-ins. That way, from an end user standpoint, all they're doing is clicking a button just like they would if they were clicking the wall tool or the door tool. Sometimes, I think, Eric, you showed that you can adjust some of the inputs there. So there are other things you can do, but essentially you could turn your Dynamo scripts into buttons that your end users just click on. It can be that simple. So I would like to do future sessions on that once we get through kind of walking through some of these scripts, because I think that would be very beneficial for everybody to know as well.
There's also a little bit of a caution because there are so many different developers doing these custom nodes and packages that there's a lot of moving parts, even with Revit coming out with new versions every year and updates in between, so that the opportunity for a certain update to break a script that you may have established is relatively high, actually, and so knowing how to go back in and troubleshoot them when it's not behaving and resolve those issues is something that you need to work on also.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good point to bring up. Each version of Dynamo and each version of Revit, some things can change within some of the nodes. Sometimes your packages will expire, or they come out with a new update and they've combined a couple of nodes together. It is oftentimes that if I create a script and then I open it maybe 6 months later in a new version of Revit and Dynamo, the script will no longer work, and it's because that package has made some changes and you have to go in and update some of your nodes. So that's definitely a good point to bring up. Great.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Eric said about that player, so when you're running Dynamo through the player, which runs it like a playlist, I guess that's the name for it, everyone will need to have those add-ons, like we're saying, in their version of Dynamo. So that's often something I see kind of break down is if you want to hand off a script for somebody to run, they just need to have those local files. What we try to do is kind of map those packages to a location on our network and use that location to kind of feed everybody's Dynamo so that the player can work accurately. I don't know how the Dynamo works, where you add a button to Revit. That may alleviate that issue, but just to be aware, if people don't have like the DynaMaps or the data shapes or whatever other add-on you might be using when you create your script, it'll often kind of break at that level. You know, and another kind of unsolicited thought, I really love Dynamo for the ability to quality check things that we're doing. Like I love the idea of using Dynamo, like we, you know, to check for structural reason, you know, check span the depth ratios of elements, check that our foundations are at the proper elevation, or maybe the 2-hour wall penetrations. You know, do you have any fire issue that you might have? You could use Dynamo to kind of query walls and see whether the wall is composed of what you need to get your rating that you're looking for. And Dynamo can just start highlighting things in your model a certain color if it's not correct, and it just gives you this visual way to kind of data mine the things that are inside of it. So there's some real power there that I really appreciate, and that's kind of the slant I take when I try to make things in there, as you know, as Joshua and Eric do too. But I just wanted to kind of plug that.
I love that, Guy, because I think that's just scratching the surface too. I know that, you know, I've showed you some of the things that we've done where we will do the same concept, but kind of extract metrics from even the Revit models themselves to see how we can be bettering our Revit models to make them faster and more efficient, and trying to catch errors before they happen. Because as we all know, when we come up on a deadline, that's when Revit likes to crash the most, or, you know, something goes wrong with your model and a fatal error or something like that. But there are ways that you can start to extract some analytics from your models to try and be proactive about, you know, how many warnings you have and the percentage of slowdown that you're seeing in your model versus clashes, or, you know, all sorts of stuff. You know, in place components, you know, model in place, we know, is one of the biggest proponents of file size. And if you have, you know, 500 of them in your model, you can catch that before, you know, your model slows down too much. So there are really endless possibilities of the things that we can do. Awesome. Well, if there are not any other questions, I really appreciate your time this evening. I will try and get the information sent out to you either as early as tomorrow or early next week. So look forward to that, and look forward to future sessions, and let us know if you're interested. Hopefully there'll be a survey that will come out shortly after this as well that you can give us any feedback on. And if you have any interest in showing any of the scripts that you're working on, even if it's something that, you know, you're a first-time Dynamo user and you figured out your very first script and you want to share it, please let us know. We'd love to see it. We'd love to talk through it. And we'd love to have you present on one of these future sessions. So we really appreciate your time. And if there aren't any other questions, we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, and one final thing is, if you joined the meeting and through an invitation from me and you hadn't registered, that means we don't have your email contact information. So I just put my email in the chat. So feel free to send me your contact, and we'll make sure you get access to the scripts that were shared. So thanks again.
Yes, great point.
All right, everyone have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.